There's weather routing and there's departure planning. What's the difference and why should you care? Hi, I'm Nika Waters and welcome to the Boat Galley podcast. I'm talking about departure planning and weather routing and why they're important when you're talking about making a passage somewhere on your boat. Today's episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by FastSeas.com. Plan your next passage using FastSeas.com. Whether you're after speed or comfort, FastSeas will find the optimum route to your destination. FastSeas, making weather routing simple. Use coupon code GALLEY2018 for an exclusive 10% discount. That's FastSeas.com. So, full disclosure, my husband Jeremy is the person who developed FastSeas. And he created this product because he knew when we got back from our last cruise that this was something that we would want when we left to go cruising again this time. So FastSeas is a weather router. It's a website that you can go to and put in your boat's information and where you want to leave from and where you want to get to, and it will show you how to get there. It's a route. You can get weather routing lots and lots of different ways. You can, of course, do it yourself. You can look at the weather that's coming. You can look at the places that you want to go and you decide the route that you want to go to, which is always a good thing anyway, even if you're using another service, whether it's FastSeas or something else. You can do a software type solution. FastSeas is one that's out there on the market. You can also hire or subscribe to a weather routing service with like a real person. Chris Parker is one that a lot of people use on the East Coast and the Bahamas and the Caribbean. There are lots and lots of others of them out there. And basically the idea behind weather routing is using the weather and choosing the route that you're doing to take advantage of good weather and to avoid bad weather. So what does departure planning have to do with all of that? Because maybe all you're going to do is look at the weather and say, it looks good for the day that I'm leaving. But the thing is, if you're planning a passage, whether it's a relatively short one, like the one that we just did recently, we did 100 miles up the Chesapeake Bay, or a longer one, 2 or 3 weeks across an ocean, say, you might want to take advantage of the whole picture. So instead of choosing to leave on a day that looks picture perfect, but actually, if you looked at it from an entire passage standpoint, you'd realize that the weather was going to turn to hell in a handbasket in a day, then you might choose a different weather window to go. So departure planning is using the length of your passage and looking at the weather over the length of your passage to figure out the best time to leave to be able to make the passage be the way that you want it to be. And I've said before, and will say again, that the answer to almost any cruising related question is it depends. And the same is true with departure planning. So I'll take, for example, this recent trip that we just did. We were taking both boats from Deltaville, Virginia up to Pasadena, Maryland. We are sailing, quote unquote sailing, we're moving the boats together. So single-handed, 2 boats in conjunction, so a convoy of sorts, going up the bay. This doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but one of the boats, Mischief, has an engine that we weren't quite sure of and a rig that we knew was compromised in some way, shape, or form. So while normally a passage like that, even though it was fairly short, 100 miles, normally on a sailboat, we would be looking for the optimum angle to sail and the fastest way to sail. With this one, we were actually looking for more of a pretty easy, flat wind, flat water situation where motoring would not be taxing. Because even if you're motoring in flat water, it's a whole lot easier on your boat and the engine than if you're motoring into big waves or in bigger seas than you might have expected. So we were looking for a weather window that was light winds from behind as opposed to stronger winds that we could sail with. So our weather window was different than somebody else's who might have wanted to leave that time. By using the departure planning feature on FastSeas, we were able to identify a weather window that turned out to be just about flat, perfect. Flat, not exactly. We actually had a reasonable amount of wind from behind, which was perfect because the waves were down, but we could also pop small sails and motor sail really to our destination, and that helped in terms of fuel economy. So departure planning is a way of looking at your passage and taking the weather across the whole passage into account. The way Fast Seas does it is you can look and see, it breaks it down in terms of whether the percentage of time that you're beating, the percentage of time that you're running, the percentage of time that you're reaching. It talks about the wind speeds as well as the speed that you should be able to make given those speeds. So it's a very, very helpful feature of Fast Seas. One thing that you might want to think about when you're looking at departure planning, and really this goes for learning about the weather for any time you're talking about some kind of a passage, but start looking at the weather, passage planning or departure planning notwithstanding, start looking at the weather about a week or longer ahead of time. This allows you to start to get to know the weather patterns and to see what happens when a front goes through or there's a shift in the weather. How much time after a front goes through do you actually have before the regular weather seems to settle in? This was really helpful for us as we were looking. We started to look at the departure planning stuff on Fast Seas probably about a week before we thought we were going to be ready to leave the boatyard in Deltaville. And what it showed us was that, yeah, we're not crazy to think that we should be able to find light southerlies or almost no wind for a couple of day period this time of year. And we also were able to watch that and identify things kind of going a little bit further out. So our first window, which actually there was a nice 4-day window, which meant we could have had all kinds of time to get up here. But that closed that, well, we didn't make that first weather window. And so we were watching and we said, oh, okay, well, there's another one that's coming. And it looks like maybe we've got about 36 hours. And then we kept watching it and it kept smaller and smaller and smaller. So we decided probably about Monday, we realized we weren't going to be able to leave on Wednesday, but we were going to have to push it back to Friday to be able to leave and have decent wind, i.e. no wind, to be able to get up to Maryland without putting so much stress onto Mischief and Calypso. So departure planning is a super useful way of thinking about your passage and not just making it to be good weather on the day that you leave. It's kind of like the idea behind if you know that it's going to take 18 hours to get somewhere, you leave so that you get there in daylight as opposed to leaving in daylight to get there at the dark. So if you're not familiar with fastseas.com, please do go check it out. Jeremy is working on it, kind of iterating it, and has some pretty cool updates in the pipeline for once we get done with some of this major boat work that we're working on. But again, he created this because he knew it was something that we would need when we left to go cruising. And it's pretty cool to be at the point that, yes, we actually are using it, even though we're back in a boatyard again. But that's all part of going cruising. I can't wait, however, to share an anchorage with you when neither one of us is in a boatyard and we've gotten there in whatever way we did, but we got there safely. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love hearing from our listeners. We love it when you share us with your friends, and we love it when you don't forget to subscribe. There's a new one of these out twice a week, every week. Have the most fantastic one.